Well, there is an interesting array of folding cutlery before the TheApostleP camera on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, you know what that means. It's going to be one of these rambling videos. I think maybe it'll be worth listening to and watching. Stick with me, guys. Got an issue I want to talk to you about today. Hi gang, Rob here. It's the afternoon of 8 March 2015, and yeah, I got something I kind of wanted to talk about today. And you see an array of folding cutlery here that is representative of both the production knife world and the either extremely low volume production or mid-tech world here in this row. You'll notice that one of the knives in each row is a Brous knife, Brous Blades by Jason Brous. The Bionic 2.0 and the T4. And we've got really two different realms of manufacture. And we have sort of interspersed in here two levels of company size, technology, and process. And those are the things I want to talk about today. If you guys watched the Bionic video I did a couple days ago, which was a follow-up video on a follow-up knife I was very anxious about. You know that it didn't go particularly well. There were some issues that the Bionic 1.0 had that I really had hoped would be fixed in the 2.0, and some of them were, some of them weren't. And the comment thread was rather interesting. In fact, Jason Brous himself joined that discussion, and I think acquitted himself rather well. And there are some points that he made, or at least some undertones of points that he made, that I kind of wanted to comment on today, because he's got a point, and he's got a valid point. So here we go. First, let's talk about these knives in the bottom row. So let's move these four out of the way. These three knives all represent what I would call low volume production knives or mid-tech knives. These are knives that all cost, let's say between $300 and $500. The Chris Reeve, this is a small Sebenza 21 in Singo. The Hinderer knives XM18, 3.5 inch. And the Brous Blades T4, the more basic model with G10 scales, D2 blade, acid stonewashed. Now, yes, these are all three mid-tech knives or low-volume production knives, where every step of their manufacture, their production, is performed and or overseen by very experienced, very skilled craftsmen. Of course, the T4, pretty much all Jason. Hinderer Knives has a factory with a small workforce of very stable, very expert employees, as does Chris Reeve Knives. Now, the T4, the Brous knife, not a lot of technology in the process, not a lot of process engineering, statistical process control. These knives come to fruition because one guy makes every part, assembles the knives, although they're run on CNC equipment so that some volume can be achieved. This is one way to do it, with one guy doing everything, each knife passing through his hands before it leaves the door. And frankly, the Brous knives that I've handled that are in this price range from this sort of process, they've all been good. I have issues with Jason's design choices or engineering choices. I still don't understand his thinking on ricassos and sharpening notches and bases of edges. I just don't agree with it because I don't think it's good. That said, in many, many, many ways, these knives are very good. You know, his actions are always excellent. You know, the flipping action's just great. His blade centering is always pretty good. Don't think I've ever had one that had any blade play in it. His machining and grinding is pretty doggone good. These knives, I think, are kind of a bargain. Now, that said, you know, they're not S35 VN, they're D2. They're not full titanium frame locks. They're G10 liner locks with titanium liners. You know, is this knife in the same class as these two knives? No, it's not. But it's a pretty good knife for what it is. You know, both Rick Hinderer knives and Chris Reeve knives have extremely well thought out, well engineered, well tested manufacturing processes. They make knives that are pretty much consistently outstanding quality every single time. You know, it's pretty rare to pick up a Chris Reeve knife and find chamfers that aren't symmetrical, to find even the handwork, you know, done at on the spine in front of the jimping that's not perfect. Even this little back of the blade, 3 hand grinds that are always on the money. You know, the computer controlled machining processes and the process engineering and process control that goes with them are all excellent. The hand finishing operations are all from experienced hands of craftsmen. You know, $425 for a micarta inlaid small Sebenza is a great deal, and you get a great knife every time. The same can be said with Rick Hinderer knives. Not to say the XM series of knives hasn't gone through some changes over the years. Certainly the preferences of the knife community have changed some things about the way they tune detents and the way their flipping action works. Of course, this knife is my XM18 flipper delete. But you know, both of these two brands, you can just depend on almost every time to be perfect. And both of them are extremely tunable. You know, like for instance, a Sebenza generally doesn't come to me from the factory with perfect lockup, perfect centering, and a blade that will drop freely when I release the lock bar completely. But its pivot system lends itself to be tuned to the taste of the owner. This is how I like my Sebenzas. Generally, they come a little tighter than this. This is how I like them. Even if you don't tune it yourself, it'll probably wear to this point over time, and I think that is designed in. The same with the Hinderer. This knife is a Gen 4, has the new detent, which to me is way too strong for a thumb stud knife, and I made this into a thumb stud knife. So I reduced some tension on my lock bar. It flies out at an unbelievable rate of speed with either hand. Blade does drop free. It will, once past the detent, it stays where it's put, but it drops closed easily. You know, just super awesome knives that are user serviceable, user tunable. You know, not necessarily so with the T4. Jason really doesn't like us to take these knives apart, and frankly, it takes a pretty high quality design, a pretty highly engineered folding knife to be user serviceable and able to be put back together repeatably. You know, that takes a hardware design that can't vary by how you put it together. You know, the way a Sebenza works is you put all the hardware together tight, evenly torqued, and you get the same knife you had when you took it apart. For instance, Paramilitary 2. Yeah, good luck with that. You can take them apart, you can clean them, service them, lubricate them. When you get them back together, you go through this dance of adjusting this screw and this screw so you get a blade that is centered, that has good action, without blade play every single time. And it's not an easy task, I gotta tell you. Not easy to do on that knife. But anyway, these knives are like the gold standard. This knife is from a very new maker with a lot of talent and a great design eye. Is this knife, and it does cost a little less, is this knife to be expected to be as good as these two knives? You know, even if you say, okay, the price difference is due to the materials, which are of higher quality and more expensive nature in these two knives. You know, this one, let's say it's $100 less. So if that's all in materials, is this as good a knife as these two mechanically? No, it's not. But remember, these two makers have been around for a long time. They make very few models of knives, and they have all been refined, and the processes that produce them have been refined to a point where they're almost automatic. You know, a combination of process engineering and the same people doing the same thing well over and over make these awesome knives. Both of them, just awesome knives. So why should we buy a Brous? Well, I'll get to that. Now let's get these guys off the table. And let's talk about these. These knives are all under $200. The most expensive one on the table, I guess, wouldn't it be the Benchmade 940, street price about $170. The Brous Bionic 2.0, $159. Paramilitary 2 in standard configuration, what are these running? 120, 125 now? And then down here, the Columbia River Knife and Tool stainless steel, Taiwan produced, Akuto 440 Ripple. Well, you tell me, guys. Prices have been pretty volatile on these. What are they? 70-ish now? And this is the bargain of the field, by the way, and a pretty doggone good little knife. Again, Spyderco, Benchmade, Columbia River Knife and Tool. High volume knives, all three of them. In fact, let's kind of do this. High volume knives, all three of these guys. US made, Taiwan made. Should this cost the least? Yeah, it should. Still a great value at roughly half of these other two. But all three of these companies have been making knives for a long time. They have money to spend with a design team, with process engineers, with quality control guys who know their statistics. They know they have the time and money to spend when they come out with a new product like this Ripple a year or two ago, to test the process, to scrap a lot of blades and handles, to build a lot of tooling that produces repeatable results in a process with great capability and repeatability, as do Benchmade and Spyderco. This knife is a super ambitious attempt at a production knife by a one-man company. Yeah, he's outsourcing some aspects of its production, but this knife generally comes to be without Jason's hands touching it. I don't think he spent 2 years developing this knife. I don't think he ran a bunch of statistics on the tooling that makes this knife to make sure that the process is capable, and so he would know when he would know that tool wear means it's time to change an insert in a milling tool so that the variability doesn't go out of control. So we would expect, wouldn't we, that we're going to find examples of the Brous Bionic 2.0 that have some issues that, you know, let's say the lock bar doesn't get fitted correctly. It needs to have more material ground off of it because it locks up at 3% and it becomes dangerous in hand. we're going to expect that. Should we? Can we justify saying I should never get that in a $160 D2 3-inch folding knife? Yeah, we would be justified in saying that. But it's a one-man company with his first attempt at a sort of higher volume production knife where his hands don't touch everything. For us to buy this knife, we got to like Jason Brous and we got to want him to succeed, because it's not perfect. But he's a one-man company trying to make a production knife without tens of thousands of dollars that he can blow investing in process controls and process engineering to make sure it comes off the line perfect every time. If we buy this knife, we got to know going in, it might be imperfect, it might have to go back. In fact, Jason might have to wait till version 3.0 to send us a replacement, because there might be issues with this knife that can't be fixed yet. In fact, that's happened between version 1.0 and 2.0. Should we stick with him? Yeah. Why? Because he's an entrepreneur trying to do something risky that takes ambition, and he's putting his family's financial future as skin in the game. This is what he does full time. This is his job. He doesn't have a paycheck coming in from the factory that he works in or from the car dealership that he runs. And he can do this at night and not care if it makes money. Brous Blades feeds his family. He is an American entrepreneur and manufacturer who's got a new venture with great potential. So as knife consumers and proponents of free market capitalism, risk-taking, and entrepreneurship, should we tolerate less than perfect Brous Bionic 2.0s for the $159 we invested in Jason's future? I think we should. All that being said, you heard me say it earlier in the video, paramilitary 2s aren't perfect. In fact, there's lots of paramilitary 2s out there that I would scrap, frankly. They're just they have blades so poorly centered and actions that bind up so tight if you remove all the blade play that the knives are basically unusable in the role we bought them for. How about 940s? I've seen some of the most horrendous blade grinds on Benchmade 940s of any knife model that there is, production knife. And frankly, there's not much margin for error here. The blade is not broad in this dimension. So if we screw up at the sharpening wheel at the factory and we remove, 90 thousandths of blade, we'd now have a knife blade with splitting axe geometry. And as we sharpen it, it's going to get worse. Also, mine has been corrected, but Benchmade has their own issues with plunge grinds and ricassos. How about the CRKT Ripple? Now, this is the expensive Ripple, mind you. And machining's beautiful. The handle is beautiful. The flipping action is really, really good. I mean, the way this knife flips for a knife blade that weighs nothing is nothing short of amazing. It's got the Ikoma IKBS bearing system in it. But here, you watched me bag on this ricasso. Well, look at this one. What do you see? Same thing. In fact, it kind of looks like those two grinds came out of the same mind. I think Toad Sticker made a comment in the Bionic 2.0 video that he thinks the Ripple's a better knife than the Brous Bionic 2.0. You know what? I'm going to agree with him. They're both in that sort of small 3-inch class of modern folders, EDC folders. They're both super light, couple ounces. I think the Ripple is a little lighter than the Bionic. It looks like it would be. Maybe not. Both about 2.5 ounces, I guess. Anodized stainless steel frame on this one. Aluminum on this one with a liner lock. This model, the CRKT Ripple, comes a little more consistent. Got better flipping action. The blade is ground nicer. The finishing is nicer. But there again, we got a company with a manufacturing infrastructure that buys things in bulk and produces in Taiwan. Should we expect that we get a little better knife for $70 than we do from Jason for $159? Absolutely. Does that mean don't buy a Bionic? Absolutely not. You know, Jason's been kicked around a little bit here as he has taken risks. You know, I think he made 500 of the first Bionic and 1,000 of these, the 2.0. He's got to sell those to feed his family. Perfect, imperfect, or otherwise, he's got to sell them. And if we want to see guys like him succeed, we got to make that investment. If our knives are less than perfect, so what? Do we do that in the hopes that someday he's the next Sal Glesser or the next Les Diasis or the next Lynn Thompson? Yeah, we do that. We do, because we want him to succeed. We want young American entrepreneurs and knife makers to become successful. So do we pay more than the value, the perceived value of this knife in relation to these other three to support a guy like Jason Brous? You bet we do. So, you know, there's a couple things I have to remember on this channel. First of all, when I review a knife, I've got to do an honest review. And frankly, you know, I got an email from Jason when I did the Bionic 2.0 review, kind of crabbing at me a little bit for doing a negative review. I also had comments in this in the thread of the Bionic 2.0 video saying, "Man, you needed to be more vociferous about the negative aspects of that knife. You said you didn't want to make a negative comment. This is a knife review. We expect the truth." Well, the reason that I just sort of showed the knife and didn't go on a rant about it is because I like Jason. And it was pretty obvious from watching the video what the problems were. And once again, Jason waded into that comment thread, and there was a lot of guys bagging on that knife. And he answered their questions respectfully. He gave deference to companies like Columbia River Knife and Tool when the Ripple was brought up. He said, "I hope to be like that someday. I hope to have the resources they have and produce a knife as good as they make." So that's my that's where I stand on that. I hope that puts it into perspective for you guys a little bit. When I do a negative review, sometimes it's a negative review that is for a product from a company that I think is just hosing us. It's not giving us a good value for our money, and they should be. You know, Knives of Alaska Featherlight Hunter. But sometimes a negative review happens because I really, really like a manufacturer or a maker, and I want to respectfully, in this forum, be able to give constructive criticism because I want to see him succeed. And I think we should want to see Jason Brous succeed. So that's all I have to say about that. So, grace to you and peace, my friends, from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the word is sharp.